My name is Dan Simmons. I'm a reporter on Click, which is the BBC's technology programme. Goes out once a week on BBC World and in this country on BBC One and BBC Two in the news channel. And we cover all sorts of different things that mainly concern consumers, consumer tech, basically. And we thought we'd arrange a session like this one because everybody's familiar with a certain piece of tech. It's this one, it's the mobile phone. And most of us have been using it for our travel and our experiences over the past few years, pretty much since data roaming became affordable, I think we'd probably agree. And now we're about to move on to more other technology, new technology, which will allow us to do different things, more things than the mobile phone currently allows us to do. And I just wanted to share with you an idea that I think where this technology could be going. We're talking about wearables, we're talking about sensors, we're talking about our cars. And I'm wondering how many people in the audience think they may have a good strategy to look at these technologies in the next few years. Can anybody put their hand up if they feel like they have a handle on these changes that are happening in technology and how it might benefit the business? Okay, that is 0 hands, by the way. That is 0 hands. Oh, one person. Right, we'll come to you.
You have put a very difficult person because with all these changes, you always have to adapt. It depends what your audience is, because in some channels, you might find quite a substantial amount of people.
We're kicking off already. We'll give you a microphone, sir, if you don't mind. What's your name?
It's Alex.
Alex. Where are you from, Alex?
I'm from Glasgow. I live in Glasgow.
Okay. Okay. So you were making the point that you need to know your audience. Is that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You need to know your audience, and then you have to identify the channels where you find your audience. This is most important. There's no point to advertise something in a place where you only have 5% of your audience.
Right. So you need to be realistic. Right, okay, so I'll just say a few more words. You're absolutely, you do need to know your audience, and you need to make, in a way, the technology fit in with what you want to do. I'd like to just read you a short quote from an independent travel writer called Olivia McKinder, who believes that travel is about experiences, but it's about something else as well. Sundowners with sea views, secluded beaches, service that does enough to make you feel at home and then gently closes the door to leave you to your own devices. Romance relies on more than the predictable. It thrives on unexpected pleasures, and that's what our secret villas have to offer. Let everyone else do the chaos, stress and bustle. Why shouldn't you contemplate the limitless horizon from the infinity pool? Or sip a glass of some outstanding vintage from your terrace as you look forward to an evening of blissful we time. The travel industry sells experiences, but it also touches emotion. And technology now will not only give us information, it will allow us to touch people's emotions. It's about to get personal. Allow me to introduce the panel. Mark Palmer is here with us. He is the man that you will need to listen to if you would like to have a strategy for bringing this into being. He manages companies' change using innovation. So if there's something they want to incorporate that's been innovated, this is the guy, the company that Mark runs called Maverick Planet. He is the founder of it, and that is his job. Ben Smith is a digital delivery manager, and until recently has been working with the US Department of Defense on some apps.
Nice things, honest, on nice things.
So we've got to be nice to him, clearly. Joshua Newman is head of mobile at Razorfish. And this is a really interesting area of the debate today, contextual computing. What do we know about the person and where they are and what they're doing that can now allow us to tap into something personal, absolutely in the moment, relevant to the environment in which they're in. So Josh will be talking a bit about that. Rafe is with us from Mobile Strategist. He's the Mobile Strategist at Digitas BI, and he is working with major vehicle manufacturers on connected vehicles. So that's where we're going to be playing Rafe's strengths this afternoon, inside the car, which we may well be using when we go on holiday. And Russell runs digital solutions at PA Consulting, and he's been working exclusively with Google on, surprise, surprise, the glasses, and he's also been looking at the iWatch from Apple, which is due to come out, now we hear, in the spring rather than early 2015. So that may be put back a month or two, that news coming out this morning. There'll be some takeaways at the end, because I always think that we can have a bit of a chat, but sometimes it's a bit tricky. You take some notes, but you'd like something a little bit more substantial. So I'll tell you about a few different takeaways that we've got for you at the end that you can then hook into what you've heard today and take it further if you want to. And we'll start with a question to each of our panellists. And what I'd like to do is just give them a chance to speak for a couple of minutes and then open up for questions. Now, Alex has kicked us off with questions already, so that's brilliant. Thank you, Alex. Don't be backwards in coming forwards. Put your hand up if you've got a question. We'll try and get a microphone to you, and we'll try to get you included. This is, after all, a Q&A panel, but we'll take it one segment at a time, and then we'll come back to one of our experts so that they can talk for 2 or 3 minutes and kick us off on a slightly different path, and then we'll explore that together. So I want to start off with Russell, because he's the man with all the gadgets, he's the man with all the fun stuff, the Google Glass and the iWatches. Russell, can you tell us a little bit about what these new technologies might be able to do for travel?
Sure. So here's Google Glass. I thought I'd bring it along for those who haven't seen it. So something that wearable technology is becoming more and more popular amongst consumers. So there's that element of people are using things like smartwatches, and now airlines are kind of catching on to that. So if you travel with Delta Airlines in the US, for example, you can check in with your smartwatch. And so some of us already use our mobile phone, and you've got your QR code that appears on there, and they can scan it. So that same code can now appear on a wearable device like a smartwatch. With head-mounted displays like Google Glass, it's really more about the customer service side. So for the travel industry, for the airline staff themselves, making that part of the check-in process or concierge services. Virgin Atlantic did a trial of this earlier this year, using it in their upper-class concierge, so greeting the customers as they drive up in their chauffeur-driven limousine, greeting them by name, taking them through the check-in process, finding out where they're traveling to and giving them information about the destination, with all that information being presented to the customer service agent just in the corner of their eye. There are still some issues to overcome, just in terms of, are these socially acceptable? And I know that some of us feel a bit self-conscious about wearing things like glass. But CETA did a survey of airline passengers recently and found that 70% of passengers would welcome the use of things like wearable technology in the airport as part of the customer service or check-in process. So I think people are more willing now to embrace that these new technologies are coming along. They both want to use them themselves to help their travel, and they want to be greeted and fast-tracked through the process using devices such as this.
Mark, can I bring you in briefly? Because we were just talking about Virgin using these glasses to check people in, and we reported on the same thing on Click when they did it. And they look at the passenger, and the glasses can recognise the passenger. They've got sort of visual recognition, but they've got all the information of the person coming up. They know where they're sitting, they know their seat number, they know whether they're important or not, whether they've got a gold card, or whether they're just sort of somebody who's not brilliantly important. What they've decided to do is that everything revolves around upper class. Do you think that when the travel industry look to introduce a new piece of technology, that it's a good idea to do it at the top end to show that something is quite sort of premium? Or do you want to sort of chance your arm with maybe slightly sort of less important customers to your business? What would you say to that?
I think it may well be upper class. I think it's an erroneous place to start. So you know, certain things happen to be that way by their very nature because of their price or their cost. I think the key thing particularly, I mean, I think, just go back to Alex's point, I disagree completely because you've already pigeoned mobile as a channel. So the fact that it might be payment that might disrupt how customers do it, the fact that it's increasingly being used, Google Glasses are now being used as a customer service benefit. Once you stop seeing it as a dimension that's like this and start, there's another thing, for example, Google have got, everybody's trying to be on Google, Google have got something called Pigeon, which basically is all about hyperlocal. So if you're Hilton and you're quite happily globally planning your Google search, if you haven't got local stuff, you're going to be completely screwed quite quickly because you haven't got local information. Going back to the point there, therefore, it may well be the most appropriate thing to do when you sit it up and you go, look, practically, how can I manage it, which is the other interesting thing. I think too many people try to go too far too fast as opposed to getting up and running. It's very interesting. Starbucks in the States is the biggest mobile payment capability. 55 million a week, I think it is, transactions. And they haven't introduced check-in, as in you can't pay. And everybody goes, why not? Well, actually, because it will muck up until you've worked out how the customer service experience works. And I think what quite rightly Virgin have done, they probably picked an area. It's worth that from a value point of view, and then they'll test and learn on what they want to do. Take another extreme. Isn't it horrendous that Ryanair's horrendous anyway? Anybody from Ryanair here? Isn't it horrendous that I still can't go, like here? I had a mobile app and I can't get into the building. I had to queue for 25 minutes with my mobile app to get into this conference. I can't go on a Ryanair. Now, that's way beyond now. It's a utility. It's ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. So it's perfectly understandable that Virgin have done it. I think it's particularly for the nature of the audience, it's completely convenient. I also think a lot of it is managing it. I then think you can often migrate these things quite quickly, provided you're thinking not features, you're thinking benefits. That's the big mistake that people make. If you think benefits, and you can think, so classic piece of information about mobile, you tend to have a much loyal consumers who use mobile are more loyal. So it's another thing. It attracts loyal customers. You also get higher payment transactions, something like 20 to 30% for travel rentals or bookings. So there are other benefits. I think it's perfectly understandable at the moment because it's too big and too expensive to do.
But if you're trying something that's really cutting edge, like the Virgin Atlantic thing,
I don't think it's cutting edge.
Do you want, well, I mean, Google Glass, for example, wasn't out at the time when they tried it. You couldn't buy them. So they're using technology that's not on the shelf.
Let me flip it, though. So I can get a Samsung smartwatch for about £150, $200. Yet I'm quite happy to give you a free hotel room. So actually, if I change my way of thinking, it's not necessarily. And so I can guess where it is. And I think that's one of the issues that people have, that they... Sensibly, they might do it, but I think this will change. It's only... Things change in the industry in a very short period of time. So there's going to be 4 times the number of wearable devices in 3 to 4 years' time, probably, at which point the price will have come down, the cost will have come down.
It will do. So for people who are thinking, actually, I don't have a foothold in this area at the moment, it sounds like your advice there, Mark, would be just get on the lower rungs of the ladder, get the basics sorted first of all, don't run before you can walk.
No, I wouldn't do that. I'm the opposite. I think people should be chief execs, because fundamentally your business is going to be screwed, in the same way the internet screwed or the travel industry. You know, if you go 5 years out and this is such a major disruptive force, you've got to have a strategy for it. Because it's going to mutate, so it won't go the way you do it. The way you do it is you start thinking, I've got to change what I work. And the separate thing you've got to do, you've got to change the structure you work in. You stop putting it in the digital department. You start putting it in your customer service department, or you start thinking of solutions, which is what Virgin do. Yeah. Virgin think of what's beneficial to my company. Let's have a go at doing it.
Okay, we'll come back to that idea in a moment, because that involves the structure of the company. I think we'll sort of
do another one.
Move on to that in a second.
W Hotels in the States, you can check in with your watch when it comes out with the Apple Watch in the spring, because someone's had a go at doing it. That's all they've done. They've had a go at doing it. I don't think it's particularly expensive for them to do, but they've had a go at doing it.
Okay, and why not? We didn't really get onto the iWatch, but what do you think about what the potential for that is?
Well, I think, Apple are slightly slow to the market with that device. So, we still have to wait until March or maybe even April or who knows. So it's a very consumer appealing device, as all Apple products tend to be. So from a design perspective, it's good. But, Samsung got out there early. Samsung's not really clear what they want in a watch yet, because they keep releasing a new product about every week that does something slightly different. But I think Google with Android Wear, they've managed to get products out there from a range of manufacturers. It's actually very easy to develop for Android Wear for a smartwatch because all you have to do is develop an Android app that is Android Wear aware. And that's all that Delta have done. So taking their existing mobile check-in app and allowing it to be used on the watch as well. So actually the incremental cost of being able to do that is quite minimal, but the benefit to the customer, they think, oh, you're quite a forward-thinking company, this is what I want to be doing. Yes, I've only paid £150 for this watch, but I want to do more than just do a bit of Fitbit and monitor my heart rate. I want it to be useful. So being able to, if you're a frequent traveller, being able to get through security check-in just by waving your arm under the scanner, not having to get my phone out of my pocket and fumble with it while I'm holding my passport, is quite a sensible thing to do.
Yeah, and it also makes us feel like we're in control. It makes us feel like we're quite cool. I remember this is a smartwatch. It's a prototype from 2006 made by Sony Ericsson. The only thing it actually allows me to do is to say I don't want to answer the call, thanks very much, and to control my MP3 player. Because we used to call them MP3 players back in 2006.
The watch has lasted longer than Sony Ericsson.
Yes, true. It's true. I can't tell you that it works any longer.
That'll be the next watch. Because why do you want your watch to have all these features? Actually, just being able to do a limited number of wearable jewellery is going the opposite way. Because you speak to a lovely lady who runs a company called Covert Design, who does wearable fashion. And she makes the problem with Silicon Valley, it puts everything you can into a piece of jewellery, as opposed to what would you wear, and then what might have in it. So if I had a lovely piece of jewellery that told me the 5 numbers that interrupted me, or when my cab was there, it's useful. So she was quite surprised when she did all the research about what wearable jewellery would be, what people were saying, I just wanted to do certain things. Why do I need to have all this? So ironic, that probably is the keep it. It's worth a lot of money.
Might be worth something one day. Okay, do we have any questions at all on the idea of using devices? And look, this is where I would come from for this. If I'm thinking to myself, if we get the microphone to this gentleman here, please, that'd be brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm thinking if I was running a business at the moment and all of this stuff was exploding, and I'm talking about watches, I'm talking about things that I can wear, I'm talking about things I don't really know about, okay? Because I'm in travel, I'm not in technology. So how am I going to learn about all of this stuff and know how I can integrate it into my travel business? What is the strategy for doing that? What are the possibilities? That's what I'd want to be finding out now. Now I've said that, of course, we'll find out what this gentleman needs to find out about. What's your name, sir?
My name's Chris Dangani, and I'm founder of Trusted Content.
Okay.
Now, the interesting thing is that as you started, you concentrated on the smartphone as the primary device that every traveller uses to actually gather information. What the strategy of Apple and also Samsung is actually to use that still as the primary hub, but to have connectivity to it from other devices. What I think is the camera companies are a little bit slow, have been very slow off the mark in creating really good quality connectivity in their premium products that can connect to the smartphone, because they see the smartphone as the threat. And the reality is you're never going to get the sort of optics in a DSLR or a micro four thirds camera in a smartphone. And we need to see those types of products coming on stream very quickly. And that will be a real driver. One example is GoPro, which has actually created that connectivity. And I think you'll probably see that increase a great deal in the future.
And so what's your question? Do you have...
It was more of a comment, really, but I'd really like to know what the panel thinks about that.
Okay. Josh?
Well, I think one of the problems is standards, and you're starting to see companies now, or alliances, form. One is All Send Alliance, which was from Qualcomm research. But similar to the Internet of Things is that one of the challenges is getting things talking to each other, obviously, but companies make sense to protect them, but I think you're starting to see that sort of as a disadvantage when it used to be an advantage, and you soon see sort of things come out. Like All Send Alliance has an incredible amount of companies backing it, and it's a sort of homeware, and it's a sort of, I guess, the start of what will create a tipping point for Internet of Things. So yeah, of course, I think one of the challenges is just deciding on a standard so everything can accept it. So.
And I was going to ask you, Ben. Ben, you're developing mobile apps, not just for the Department of Defence.
No, for nicer people as well.
But for lovely people as well. Are there, are we all waiting like we were with 3G for the killer app for wearables? Or do you think there's something there that people are missing at the moment?
I think if you want to understand wearables, you can look at tablets and look at the conversations we all had about tablets, where we looked at iPads and things like that, and we said, it's just a big phone. What on earth are people going to do with that? And the point is, you put that device in consumers' hands, and they came up with fantastically creative ways to use it. It unlocked their imagination, and then you actually saw that ecosystem take off. Not because of the way that Samsung or Apple told us we should use our iPads, but because of the ways that we could foresee. And if you think about the most recent iPad launch event, Apple showed a video of people using an iPad to do coaching. You know, you took it to a sports field and you filmed participants and things like that. And it moves to that gentleman's point about all of these devices converging. And I think the crucial thing here is that we've got this very immature set of platforms, and we shouldn't expect that we're going to run straight towards the first solution. What we need to do is to iterate a few times. And so, for example, in my work with DoD, one of the hardest things I had to do was not security, was not dealing with 4-star generals, was not choosing Android or iPhone. It was telling them, we're going to build a few prototypes and throw them away. What do you mean I'm going to throw my software away? I've wasted all my money. No, we're going to invest money in learning. And I think if you represent a large brand in here, one of the challenges you might have is persuading the people who hold your budgets to let you go and do some learning so you can discover your consumers. But it will be some of the best money you spend. Okay, how many people here are in the industry, travel industry, and I mean not within press or sort of but actually run or are a member of staff of a travel agency or in the travel industry or in the car business or anything like that? Put your hands up if you wouldn't mind. Okay. All right, excellent. Now, could you leave your hands up? If you keep your hands up just for a second. I'm not going to pick on anyone, so just, kind of just leave them up. Could you leave them up if you are unsure but would like to use some of this new technology in your business? Okay, I saw 1 or 2 hands go down, but basically that's just about everybody. Right, the last question, leave them up. Leave them up if you don't know how to do that. Okay, now, would anybody like to ask a question about that? Using new technology to help your travel business, and you don't know how to do that. This lady on the end here, if you would mind. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Geeta, and I'm from Spain, and we're looking into outbound travel. And my question to the panel is, if I'm starting to look into outbound travel, what's the best way to start with using technology that can help me reach my customers, take them out, and prepare me to teach them? For example, if we're launching glasses like the gentleman showed us, I should be in a position to tell them how to use it and what they should be expecting at the airport and other places. Okay.
Russell, do you want to pick up on that?
That's an interesting question.
Very good question.
It's very important to carry forward my business in this industry.
Sorry, can I just understand what you mean by outbound travel? Just what type of business?
Outbound travel, we're currently only into inbound. We do tourism inside, but to take them outside, to give them, for example, crossing borders, just doing between Spain and London, for example, or Spain and taking them to Asia, okay, where these markets are still not so much at par with what we're seeing here.
So your question is revolving around how you set expectations with your customers as to...
And how do I select which technology would be the best to work with? Like if I'm creating mobile, if I want them to use the mobile apps, or if I want them to use, I don't know if I'm getting my question out right.
So are you thinking about developing mobile applications to give your customers information about countries that they're travelling to, for example?
Yeah.
Is that the sort of thing?
Yeah, because with Google and everything, it's so extensive that you go crazy. Even if you have all the information at hand, you go crazy. So I want to be in a position to give them specific knowledge, like very, very tailor-made.
Sure. So it depends whether you want to go as far as actually developing custom applications, or if it's a case of just curating information and applications that already exist. So pointing them in the right direction. So, for example, there are already applications available for smartwatches which are very travel-oriented with the traveller in mind. So things like learning a language, translation, navigation. We've already talked about the whole airport process. So there are, pointing your customers in the direction of what's already available. So if you're traveling to such and such a country, why don't you install this app? Because it will help you get around Paris or Tokyo or wherever. Equally, if you want to learn a language, Duolingo or something like that is smartwatch compatible. So you can actually do flashcards on your phone a couple of weeks before you go and try and brush up your language skills.
Can I jump in? Another one, because connectivity is often poor when people travel, brief them on all the specialist apps for the destinations that you're going to take them to so that they can have them installed and get the benefit when they land rather than fighting with Wi-Fi or roaming fees. Sorry, Russell.
Absolutely. I think the other thing it's worth talking about, kind of a guiding principle, is we talk about all these new technologies, be it wearables or anything else. You have to think about whether it really is providing a benefit. And sometimes the temptation is to implement these technologies for the sake of it. I think the simplest way to think about it is it replacing something and is it making it better? And if it's not, you probably don't want to be doing that. The other thing to think about, I think particularly from the travel industry perspective, is don't necessarily think about creating solutions yourself. There are going to be a lot of products out there, and I think partnering is going to be really important in order to understand what you can get the best for your customers. And actually, the biggest challenge at the moment is probably the education element. The technologies, the solutions exist out there, and explaining to your clients how they can get the most out of the mobile technology, be it wearable or be it just on the smartphone, is probably the most important thing at the moment. And you are going to have to experiment and find out what works. And I think that's the way to introduce it. And you'll get the feedback from your clients, and they will say that worked more and that didn't. And that's probably the most practical way to do it.
Yeah. Ben, very quickly.
Very quickly. I was looking at some research recently and discovered that in the UK, over 30% of consumers say that they are comfortable and knowledgeable about wearable devices. The number doesn't matter, but it really surprised me that it's as high as 30%. So you have to go out there and do some immediate research on your customer base. You've got to go out there and do the hard yards, because oftentimes the assumptions you make about knowledge, comfort, education, and also who's going to use your products and services. It doesn't matter that there are more Android devices out there if all of your high-spending customers have iPhones, to take a very simplistic example.
But the good news is, it seems from the members of the panel who have spoken, is that you don't necessarily have to innovate yourself. I mean, we are aware that there's a lot of travel companies out there that don't have a big innovation budget for new technology. There are existing solutions out there. It's about finding the right ones for your customers.
I think that people confuse innovation with technology. So smart businesses innovate themselves. That doesn't mean they have to innovate with technology. Absolutely. So what lots of companies don't do is just sit down internally and almost relook at what they do and think, how could I do it differently, or what would the customer want? So the classic problem that I encounter is companies have departments to do certain things. They're historic because that's how they've done it. And if you take mobile and data, typically the mobile person comes out of the internet person. They'll have a customer relationships person over there. They'll have somebody else doing that. And if you sat them all in a room and then you had a conversation about what was it that we could develop that would be to the benefit, actually it's relatively easy to get to the answer. Some of the stuff could be stuff that's already there because you go and find it. So, for example, there are languages, there's travel things that translate text into 50 different languages. That doesn't cost you anything. That's what most people don't do. So the change bit is not difficult. What it just means is people stop thinking the way they are. And the moment you get past, it used to be you had to understand technology to do technology. You don't. You can now say, I would like to do this. you can probably either find it or you can get someone to develop it. And that could be buying in a developer or hiring an agency. It used to be, it doesn't. What common sense rules, restructure, and there's some big areas like data, which you've got to do something about it, because if they're travelling, you've got to do something about it. But I think people should innovate internally first, and then it's much easier to do the answers. Often it gets stuck because it's baton passed between all the different departments.
And we'll get really keen, actually, to finish on that idea, so that I think it's a big takeaway, the way that sometimes you might look at your own company, whether you're at the top of it or in the middle of it or even at the bottom of it, and think we're not set up to think differently. So how do we set ourselves up to think differently so that we can then empower ourselves to innovate? I would like to bring Rafe in now and talk about something, not about something that we wear, smartwatches, or even something that we carry like smartphones, but about driving, about smart cars. Now, recently, the program that I work on went to Germany to report on a racing car that can drive itself. Nobody was in the cabin at all, and it hit 149 miles per hour. It outdrove the driver that had just got out. It beat his lap time by 5 seconds. And it's the first time that we've seen a racing car go at racing speed around a circuit without anybody in the cabin. It was all completely controlled by sensors and smart devices. Now, I'm not going to take you there because I know we're not quite in the racing industry. We don't have to get there that fast. But I know, Rafe, you've been working with some of the vehicle manufacturers about the sorts of things that we might be able to do with our vehicles and how that might be incorporated into the travel industry. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. The driverless cars are kind of the sexy bit at the moment, but it's really the end result of something we're looking at now. And there will be a big step change. There'll be a mode change, maybe in the way transport networks work, but I don't really want to talk about that. I want to talk about connected cars and why they're important. A lot of this is around the fact that EU regulation means by 2016, 60% of the cars being sold will be connected. What that means is they have a connection to the web, to the internet, and data from that car can be available on the internet, and things from the internet can come into the car. There's two big areas to think about. One is the very direct connected car, and this is the idea of data from your car appearing on your smartphone. So it might be an alert that your car needs repairing, but equally well, it's about the expression of your car as an app on the smartphone and the remote control that goes with that. So it's a sort of the science fiction of being able to walk up to your car and have it unlock because your phone's in your pocket. But you can extend that in quite a few different directions. For the travel industry, it might be something very simple in terms of rental cars, that you won't necessarily need to pick up a key. You'll just be able to go and use the car and get into it. But I think the more interesting part for the general travel industry is the idea of the screen that's in your car on the head unit, on the dashboard, is going to become more intelligent because it's connected directly to your smartphone. And that's actually the way most consumers think about a connected car, being able to experience the apps that are on their smartphone in their car. And that's also around points of information and location. So this is a pretty big topic, but you can imagine as you're driving along, you're getting personalized recommendations about things that might be of interest to you that are around you. And it could be about restaurants, it could be about tourist attractions, it could be about hotels. And so for the travel industry, what's important is to get the data, the place information and the service information into a format such that it'll be ready for those connected cars. A lot of that is going to be into places like Google Places, but there are other companies in this space as well here, which is a division of Nokia. And so thinking about how that place information is made available to consumers, and effectively, in one sense, it's an extension of search engine optimization apart from it's about location and services. That's the kind of one level, but it does then go beyond that when you can start talking about apps in cars, and does an app behave in a different way when it's in a car, and does the travel industry have anything to say about that? Of course you do, because the car and vehicles is a kind of a fundamental part of travel, and particularly when you're traveling, you're kind of more open to those recommendations, that personalization and content. But it's a broad area to talk about.
And how soon are we talking as far as sort of it becoming commonplace? So we take our holiday to wherever it may be, let's say the developed world for now. How long will it be before we arrive at the airport and we get one of these cars, these enabled cars?
That's a difficult question to answer because these connected cars are becoming available now, and we will see things like CarPlay for Apple, Android Automotive, MirrorLink will become fairly standardized in cars in the next 5 years. Whether the rental industry decides to take that on and offer it as a consumer service and as an added extra is more difficult to say. I think you can look at the example of personal navigation devices, GPS navigation, which took a long time to get into the car rental industry. So I actually think the more immediate benefit will be for people taking their own cars on holiday, particularly if they're staying in their own country.
Okay, something they can use. Joshua, your business looks at how we can make use of the context of the information that we're getting and how that might then be used. The car fits into that, but there are other things as well, aren't there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just on the car thing, I'm reading a book called Social Machines, and just quickly. And one of the examples they have in there is getting things to talk. It's about Internet of Things or making things social. And a good example they have in something not only is it explicit interaction with the device, or the car in this case, but implicit. So the data from the car could be shared, and you have this collective intelligence, which I'll return to soon. This collective intelligence is quite useful when aggregated. So the example they used was a car driving along, was the inaccuracy of weather forecast. So using local sort of cars, detecting whether the window screen thing was going, they could determine where the rain was and proximate. So it's interesting, not only thinking of the explicit sort of interaction for the user, but also implicit. So onto context, which is quite similar, is that now we have all this data, whether it's cloud data or all these censored data. What can we do with it is the question. We're collecting this data. And I guess the thing is and not only that, is our footprint, our digital footprint is increasing. Like more of our life is now digitized. Everything we do is on the internet, etc. So context computing came around about ubiquitous computing around the 94, I think. And the idea was to simplify interaction. That's the general goal, is to simplify the interaction, especially as the device or systems become more complex. So what can you do with context, or why would you care about context? The benefits that they're achieving was around making systems more aware of the environment and the user, such that they could deliver personalized experiences. And I'll back these up with sort of examples related to the travel industry. You have proactive sort of autonomy on the devices, adaption, and also automatic tagging. So personalization is quite an easy one. So for an example, because your preferences, your taste, your likes are recorded in your digital avatar or life, you can augment them onto, say, example, the infotainment system in the flight system. So you walk there, it knows the music you like, it knows the videos you like, it can automatically, adjust it or create the content. It doesn't cost much, and the data's already there, and it adds value. And obviously, you can extend that recommendation across any sort of vertical. What are the ones that I say? Adapting. So adaptation is interesting, and it's probably the first thing you talk about when you're talking about contextual aware sort of devices and applications. So that's really just being aware of the current context of the user. So you're changing how the device responds or is presented to the user. So an example could be as simple as when you're on flight, the phone goes on silent mode or flight mode just before the plane takes off. Or if you walk into the airport, it sort of shows you the sort of, it may show you the time and the gate where you need to deploy. It's an interesting app that I think Yahoo or Twitter bought called Cover. Essentially, it's a launcher for Android, and it creates your applications. So it filters your applications and only presents the ones that are relevant to you. So if you read the news in the morning, it will show you the sort of BBC. In the afternoon, you might go on Twitter, and it might be Twitter, yeah, flag. So we have autonomy. So one of the main drivers of this contextual aware sort of computing was to simplify things, as I mentioned before. But it was around sort of ubiquitous computing, where essentially what is the Internet of Things.
Can I come back to that application you were just talking about? It's called Cover.
Yeah.
And effectively what it can do is to not restrict, but to just offer and highlight the apps that will be useful to you on your journey. And that cover could be programmed or controlled by perhaps your travel agent?
Yeah, well, I guess so. I mean, I guess it's adding this. A good way of thinking about contextual aware computing and devices in general is having an agent. Once again, similar around about the same time, they started doing a lot of work or research around smart agents. And the idea was that you have a search agent that would search for things you might be interested, a creator or filterer. So, I mean, it's a good way of thinking about how systems could be to add value to the user. So if, on the journey path of booking or traveling, I guess when you're doing the inspiration, looking for or research, that's interesting when you may have an agent that starts filtering, recommending things. What's interesting, so imagine Netflix for travel, and you're seeing this quite a bit, obviously a lot of startups coming up. But what would be interesting, I think, is having collective preferences. So if you could have, just an idea, if you could have yourself and wife going on a holiday, maybe it tailors both your preferences or collective preferences to adjust the sort of recommendations. But yeah, exactly, Cover's a good example. And I guess looking similarly is that you have Google now, which is probably the role model for contextual aware computing. Now if it detects whether you're searching for travel and basically will keep you updated with recommendations or offers. So it uses, and to Alex's point, I think, about when you're talking about channels, I mean, it's the worst way of thinking about things. We now design things around systems or services, and Google's actually a good role model and why Android Wear is so interesting, because it delivers things based on what it calls cards or streams, and that will essentially mean that your application will be faceless. It will be as seen as a service. And that's how I think you need to think about digital and these other devices.
Okay, Mark?
I think there's a very bigger, interesting point. If you go, I once was at a conference, a music industry conference, and they were all talking about how the music industry needs to change. Then 5 years later, they're all dead, basically. And there's a similar sort of conversation going on here. It's quite interesting you mentioned Google, PayPal. In the middle of all this is data. In the middle of all this is the ability to understand and make new business models. That's what they're all looking at to do. So the reason Google's pushing voice is it sees voice as a key thing that you want to be able to use, which gives them data access points to context something else. You can well imagine, and I'm certainly aware of, there'll be a meeting somewhere where someone's thinking of the new business context that they can get this. I don't imagine it will be the travel industry. I can imagine it's either going to be a startup within the travel agency who will join these ideas up, or it's going to be the likes of Google, PayPal, who are just going to join up, and Apple's sitting there exactly for that reason. If I've got a watch which is voice activated, which has got payment on this, which knows where you are, and I've already got your iTunes account, hang on, what am I going to do? I find it quite ludicrous that you, for example, go into a hotel and you have to check yourself in again, and hotels ask you, do you want an alarm call? And you go, no, because I've got my mobile. And this stuff, by its very nature, it can start to predict, is the simple things. You've already got now in the medical sector. Medical sector is really interesting to look at because it has to be hardcore data. It's got what they're doing in medical with mobile is quite scary. They can actually predict your elderly parent is about to fall over, therefore you should intervene before they actually fall over and go to hospital, because you can start to see the patterns of their movement. And this is not far away. It's just a case of someone bringing it down. So someone is going to be sitting in a room now working out, the taxi industry is completely ripped apart by someone saying, hey, why don't we join? This is what's definitely going to happen.
Stay with me, Mark, for a second. With that idea, that's monitoring, that's tracking. Does anybody here have any concerns over security or privacy when it comes to the new technologies that we're looking at? Okay. Mark, could you say a little something for us? Because I know you do work with companies managing innovation and change. Yeah. What do you say to those companies when they say, look, we'd love to do this, Mark, but we're scared. You know, we hear about hacking attacks here, we hear about getting sued there because of privacy concerns.
Well, I think you're completely right. So I think there's a practical answer, because you've got customers and you've got relationships. You're very daft if you don't consider that. There's a separate reality. Then you often look at what they're currently doing. So ironically, when you then ask, what are you currently doing, you often find, well, hang on, that's not true. So ironically, mobile in the main, payments not quite yet, but compared to what lots of people do. So most banking attacks, by the way, are done by someone just randomly. It's a guy in Ukraine randomly just going through Facebook until he finds someone and he puts his mum's name in, he puts him, and that's who did the banking cap. So lots of the stuff that we see about cybersecurity. So that's the first bit. The second thing is you just need to put sensible protocols in place, and if that's a big issue, you don't do it. But it's the same with anything else. I mean, I think you should do it, but you've got to be sensible about it. I think there's a reality. The technology is going to move on anyway, and it's going to be there. It's going to be almost. It's probably already now the more secure system via mobile. Anyway, to be perfectly honest,
I would agree that mobile actually has security often built into it. I think the big issue here, though, is all of this is really about data. It's what it comes back to. Sensors and everything else and services creating more and more data, and so the problem is actually the amount of data that's out there, and I think companies aren't always set up to deal with that level of data, which is where the security breaches happen, and particularly when you start combining different strands of data together from different sources. Mark was talking about earlier, different departments talking to each other. It's where there is the greatest potential, and that's where you have the biggest savings, and it's where you have the biggest business transformations.
Ben,
but because they're new areas, there is a sort of learning still to be done, which is where the security concerns come in.
How do we deal with that, Ben? Because there is a lot of information that we're going to bring together from various elements.
I don't think we should address the technical in this room today, because we can go out and hire technical experts and take advice about the situations we've got. The key thing is, if you're taking a user's data, you need to explain to them what you're taking, why you're taking it, and how you're going to handle it. And the challenge, and again, I mean, I see lots of heads nodding, because we've all learnt to do that in our web transactions and in our smartphone transactions. But just because we're now getting into a rental car and beginning to stream some content, or because we're using some check-in app on our watch, doesn't give us the right to ignore our obligations to do that. So what we need to do is to think about what we call the user journey, map that through, and to make sure that we start with the absolute minimum. The danger, I started off 10, 15 minutes ago talking about testing and throwing things away, and you build a prototype culture where, don't worry, we'll put security on when it goes large, and
as in the press,
and that begins to bite you. So build it in, because at the moment we know privacy and security concerns are an inhibitor, and they will stop people engaging with your attempt from the get-go. So make privacy and security a feature. It's something positive to describe to the user, and I leave it at that.
Yeah, that's good advice, John.
I was just going to add to that. Basically, I think privacy is changing. What people would consider private is evolving. And I think they did a survey, and someone could correct me, it was something like, $10 or something that they'll give away most of the information. The other interesting thing now is privacy is an obvious issue or challenge, and you're getting I guess, focused companies building personal information management systems, and I'd imagine or predict that eventually you'll have a central body where you're leasing your private, or you're leasing your personal information to enhance the services. So Gimbal, which is an iBeacon service from Qualcomm, was from Qualcomm Research, they have an interesting thing doing something very similar, where so their platform allows or derives the interest of the user such that the beacons can deliver personalized and relevant information. And they had a good model, actually, and I'd imagine that would be quite similar. Like you have now the health API, and Apple is similarly with Google. So who's who's going to be the platform that will manage the personal information, which will be interesting. And I think it's either going to be a technology player or...
So there's just one bit on the data thing. There's a phrase called data mining, where you put MY rather than MI. And one of the key things is that it's an exchange. So what is increasingly happening is, provided there's a fair exchange or a reasonable exchange, so in the car model, there is now insurance policies that if your teenage son is willing to drive within a certain thing, that's a fair exchange. And that's increasingly going to get really, really important, because at the end of the day, you can do all the privacy, but if it's not a fair exchange, like, I don't want you to, even what they're giving it to me free, so suddenly that's a big issue because it's not a fair exchange.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. If you're interested specifically in that point that Mark makes about the insurance industry and seeing how tracking data, go and look at what Admiral Insurance are doing in the UK. They have a horribly named app called Appy Driver. It monitors your driving characteristics and gives you a discount on your insurance according to the as Joshua was talking about, the context information picked up from the phone about speed, acceleration, that kind of thing. And it gives a great cue to what Mark was talking about.
So we think about trading our privacy to a degree and getting something back for it, not just giving it away to the industry. Alex, I'm going to let you get a question in now, and then I'll sum up shortly.
Everything that's been discussed so far, so that I guess many people are very confused at this moment. As you said,
these technologies and these features you are talking about there, they're absolutely amazing if you know how to use them. But then the most important thing is doing your budgeting for it. Because everything you've been talking about is very expensive. And if you want to do it on a bigger scale, you might end up that you spend everything from your bank account and your technology is not up. And by the time you finish your application, it comes another problem. You have to bring this application into the people's phones. And that's where you are going to spend more money. Because everything, at the end of the day, everything ends in money. Everything ends in the financial side.
It's a high-risk strategy because it's expensive anyway, and then propagation of what you designed...
Unless you are Richard Branson, it's a very, very risky
Does anybody
strategy.
on the panel... we're a bit short of time, Alex, so I do want to get you an answer for that. Does anybody on the panel want to pick that up specifically?
Only that I'd slightly disagree.
Disagree
so I think with what I was referring to earlier with Android Wear, just as one example, other platforms are available. What Google are trying to do there is make it easier for developers to support a range of wearable technology by developing one application. And we also discussed earlier it's about being able to view the same information through the device that suits you best. But what we don't want to get into is, yes, you've got to develop 17 different apps because you want to support all the devices that are available. So I think as the market matures, we'll see a lot more convergence. It's going to make it easier to develop apps. And when they add things like Glass to Android Wear as well, you won't have to develop separately, and that will drive the cost down. But we're still at an early stage, and these are evolving technologies.
Sorry that I interrupt. Yes, exactly what you're speaking about, the Google Glasses. What Google is actually planning to do with this is they test it now. They'll put it in retail. And you'll end up walking on the street, and at the moment you walk from next to Tesco's, they will tell us, look, Tesco has potatoes on discount in your left-hand side. And guess what? Tesco's going to pay for that. So that's what Google is planning. Google is all about advertising. Google is one of the biggest corporations over the world, and they make money from advertising, over 50 million.
It's common policy. I think O2 are going to go along the same route, to be honest with you, with their Wi-Fi hotspots that will be across the UK that we can now use for free. And there's a similar kind of trade-off with regards to that. I'm going to stop you there, Alex, just for a moment, because
there's not enough time to talk about this.
I do want to finish very briefly with Mark, who, as we've said before, does manage innovation within companies. What would you say to people here, Mark, who are thinking, OK, I do want to get into this. We saw the number of hands go up. We are excited about the technology we're hearing about, but perhaps we just don't know what the first steps are. What would you typically say to a company?
I'd say the first reality, just behave like a human being and think about the problem from a human and a business and a customer point of view. Don't get into the technology. The technology is a red herring. Right. Because that's where you get lost. Because I couldn't explain how this works, and some of these guys are way, way better than I am, but they'll all tell you, the technical people will go back its user and how you do it, and that's what happens. It's where we get confused. The second thing I'd say is you've got no choice. To get yourself scared So to your point, I can't afford to invest in it. Turn it the other around. What if you don't? Yeah. So, yeah, but therefore the danger is, this is what most people do. Most people, if I ask the question, who thinks within 3 years they're going to have a proper mobile strategy within their business? Do you want to put your hands up? Right, so that's the majority of people normally, and yet most people will wait till 3 years and wonder why it's changed. So, so first put something towards it. So there's a rule that's done, for example, the 7-20-10 rule, which says of your budget, 70% of what works now, 20% of what you do now in a different way, and then 10% just see where it goes. That's the first bit. The second thing is I would look, rather than at the technology, the biggest issue that stops change is that nobody wants change. The issue is inertia in the business. So you're better off addressing what's your structure or your way of working. You're better off picking 1 or 2 project areas that you're going to try. And that's what's interesting about some of the companies we talked about. The fact that the W hotels are trying the Apple Watch, that Virgin is doing it. What they've done is they're willing to have a go and learn. You don't have to pay. You can go and learn by talking to a startup who's got no money and say, can you work with us? You can go to an agency and say, we've got our data. There's lots of different ways of doing it, and lots of people these days will partner.
When I was mentioning about the budgeting stuff, I was meaning that you have to, even if your budget is low, you have to spend most of your budget into planning this. And you have to get it right at the point of planning, because you don't want to spend a lot of money in an application or in a platform which is up there for 6 months, and after 6 months goes down.
I disagree, because actually what you're better off is having a smaller meeting around what your strategic issues are. The conversation we had as to what you do, you sit down and agree, and then you brief out what you do. So often people run off. It's typical. I need a mobile capability. I need this guy to go off this. And what they've got is 55 trains running. By the time you get to use it, it's all out of date anyway, as opposed to what's my practical business issue? What's my worry? Is anybody on Airbnb? Anybody? Right, I really suggest you look at Airbnb, which is a startup who's going to muck up the travel industry and consumer behaviour to such an extent. So I'm on it as a renter as well as a user. And if I don't respond to a customer request within an hour or a day, they put me down. So they're actually, and and you've also got these things like impatience. You've got new dimensions, you know. If I'm impatient, which is the world, you know, anybody on Candy Crush? Yeah? Candy Crush makes $1 million a day from impatience because I can't wait half an hour to play the game. Well, hang on, I'm in a hotel. I'm on they're fundamentals in business. So the simple answer is, number 1, work out the bigger things you want to do. 2, disrupt your structure. Stop siloing. Work around a problem. Get a core people. Agree a limited number of things to do. And the other easier answer is book a meeting with the chief exec in 2 months' time to say what you're going to do. That's the first thing I would do. Commit yourself to say to your chief exec what your 5 things are going to do. Then if you just do that, I guarantee you'll change.
Because of inertia.
Just because it's stopping the whole thing about waiting and waiting. Just book the meeting in. Just book the meeting in.
And is it about changing 1 or 2 people's jobs within the company?
Well,
so
that's at a higher level. I think it's much more about stopping. It's much more about people think within their own area. The bigger issue most companies have is they have targets within areas. Yeah. So there'll be a customer relationships target, there'll be a bookings target, there'll be a billings target, and they're all in separate areas, as opposed to, this is what's interesting about joined up companies. They don't have these separate things. Just get on and do something.
And it was interesting you said, I mean, Alex brought the idea of budget up, and I think that that's another big thing on people's minds, that we don't have, you know, these big ideas sometimes seem like they require big budgets, but what you seem to be saying, Mark, is that there are other options out there that you can explore.
Well, if you've got an initiative, if you've got, these are the 3 things we want to do, then the second question is, the danger people have is I can't afford it, as opposed to how important is how can I afford it? So you do it and. So it could be, well, we're going to close that down. And it could also be, I'm going to trial it over here. If I can prove the financial case, I take it internally. People talk themselves out of this all the time.
We're going to have to wrap it up very briefly. Josh, very quick last word?
I was just going to say, as Ben was saying before about prototyping, the concept in Silicon Valley is, or in anywhere digital, is MVP, minimal viable product. So you're talking about this huge planning session. That's definitely the wrong way to go. I mean, you want validation through users, not through analysis and research.
Sometimes it might happen that you start on a way, you reach.
That's a good thing.
Quarter of the way.
It's about learning.
Okay, three quarter of what I've done so far is wrong. Quarter,
is okay.
And run with it.
Keep this cutter.
Alex, I'm going to have to let you run with it a bit later. All of this panel will be here for the next sort of 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes for you to exchange business cards, talk about anything that you've heard about during this afternoon. There'll be a podcast that Rafe here and Ben are going to put together discussing the themes and questions that have come up this afternoon. That will be available from the 24th of November.
Dan, breaking news.
Yes.
It's available right now.
It's available right now.
Published this morning as a primer on all of these
And
topics.
it's 361podcast.com.
That's correct, yeah.
Fantastic. 361podcast.com. So that's Ben and Rafe doing a podcast between them. Ben has his own blog, which he will be blogging on after the session on wirelessworker.net after the event. And as I say, you've got the Twitter handles for everybody here. You'll note that the names of the people, if you go top to bottom, you should be able to go from Rafe all the way across to Ben on the right-hand side if you'd like to get in touch with them. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for our panellists' time.